Okay, gang, we are going to be talking about our 4.1b notes, triangle sum properties. We're going to start with the review problems in this video. Our goal by the end of this lesson is to know how to name a triangle, only given points and after graphing it. But first we're going to start with the vocabulary that we learned yesterday and talk about the different kinds of triangles. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to reflect over yesterday's main ideas. And a couple things that we learned yesterday that I want to make sure that you are aware of is how we classify triangles. That's what the directions will say in your problem. And that really just means that we will group our triangles. And when we grouped them, we did them by two different sets of names. We talked about the sides of the triangles, and we talked about the angles of the triangle. So make sure that you know all of those vocabulary words from yesterday that refer to the sides. That would be scalene, isosceles, equilateral. And all of the angles. That would be right, acute, obtuse, and equiangular. The other things that we talked about were about the angles of the triangle, and we talked about the interior angles and the exterior angles. And the interior angles, remember, we drew our triangle and we labeled these guys 1, 2, and 3, and we talked about how those inside angles are all related, and if the shading is all inside the triangle, then we can set up the equation the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2 plus the measure of angle 3 equals 180 degrees. So whenever you're talking about the interior angles of a triangle, you automatically want to think about the number 180 degrees. Then we talked about the exterior angles of the triangle. And remember, we started out with the same triangle, but then we drew a little tail on there so that we could draw our outside angle. We still had our angles 1, 2, and 3, but now this angle 4 is on the outside of the triangle. Notice that it's not inside at all. And that's when we took these two angles that don't touch angle 4 and we added them together. The measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2 equaled the measure of angle 4. So that was our exterior rule. We used the two remote interior angles, the sum of the two remote interior angles, and that always equals the exterior angle. Understanding that that triangle can have a tail anywhere, and I would use these two angles to equal this exterior angle. Wherever the exterior angle is, you use the two angles that don't touch it. All right. Then a little bit of review specifically about all of the kinds of triangles that we have. Looking over here at the left side of your notes, I want to review our side names and our angle names. The side names, remember, are scalene, isosceles, and equilateral. Scalene, remember, has 0 sides the same. Isosceles has at least 2 sides the same. And equilateral has all 3 sides the same. And then we talked about the angle names. And remember, the angle names that we talked about were acute, right, obtuse, and equiangular. Acute, that's where everything was less than 90. Remember, a right triangle had one 90-degree angle. An obtuse triangle has one more than 90. And an equiangular triangle, remember, has all equal angles. In fact, all of the angles are 60 degrees. So let's take that information and draw some pictures that go with it. So the first one we have here, we are going to do a right isosceles triangle. And so as soon as we see the word right, we're thinking 90 degrees. And then as soon as we see the word isosceles, we're thinking two sides the same. So the first thing we can do is draw a right triangle. And then if we go back and think about our notes, we did learn that in a right triangle, the one opposite, the 90 degrees, is always the longest, which means it can't be one of the equal sides. And so in this case, the two equal sides would have to be the other two, and then this hypotenuse would be different. So there's an example of a right isosceles triangle. Then the next one we have here is we have an acute equilateral triangle. Remember, an acute triangle is less than 90. Equilateral triangle is when all three sides are the same. So when we draw this triangle, we have to draw a picture that has all of the sides equal to each other. So we put tick marks, the same kind of tick marks on all of the sides. And then that automatically will make it acute. And in fact, if we have three equal sides, we're going to learn coming up here that those angles will all be the same, and it turns out that they are all 60 degrees. But again, we're going to learn that in a little bit. The last thing that we have in this section right here is we are going to do an obtuse scalene triangle. And as soon as we see the word obtuse, we know that it's going to be greater than 90 degrees. And we have 0 equal sides. So we have to draw one big angle in there. And then we have to mark all of the sides differently. So we mark different tick marks on all the sides. Understanding that the longest side does not have to have the most tick marks. It just happens that I did it this way. But we easily could put 4 tick marks on the shortest side, and then 3 and 2, as long as they're all different. To show that this triangle is obtuse, we don't have a mark for that, but we could put any number we want right here in that corner. Like we could put 100 degrees right there. We could put 110 degrees, 150 degrees, anything we want to show that that is an obtuse angle where we put our biggest angle. Then let's jump down to these next questions. Here they want us to classify the triangles described. Only assume the information given. So if we only know what they tell us, then we will name the triangles. So in the first one, they talk about the sides being 4, 4, 4. Since those are all equal sides, we know that that must be an equilateral triangle. That's all that we know, though, because we have 3 equal sides. Let's jump over to question 7. Now they're going to tell us about the angles, and the angles are 30, 55, and 95. So only given that information, what can we conclude? And this guy right here, the 95, is the dead giveaway. That makes this an obtuse triangle. Now what I want you to do is just pause where we are, go ahead and fill in these next 4 review questions, and then I'm going to come back in just a minute and show you some answers. Okay, we're back. Let's look at question 5. Notice the numbers that they give you, 12, 12, and 14. And with that question, I noticed that we have 2 numbers that are exactly the same. And so that means that that triangle is an isosceles triangle. When we look at question 6, we have 14, 18, and 20. All three of those sides are different. That means that we have a scalene triangle with 0 equal sides. Jump over to number 8. And number 8 has one number that stands out, and that's this 122. And as soon as you see that one number that's more than 90 degrees, we know that that is an obtuse triangle. And then the last question, we have this one number that is exactly 90 degrees. That tells us that that must be a right triangle. So check your work there and see how you did. Now what I want you to do is pause again one more time and jump down and try questions A, B, C, and D. Name the picture as best you can given the markings that are on the picture. And then I will catch up with you and we'll check how you did. All right. For this question, for these questions, again, remember it says which term or terms best describe the triangle drawn with the given marks and angles. So you can only use the marks that are given in the picture. When I look at question A, I do see this 100 right here. That's more than 90. And then I look at my tick marks and I have 3 tick marks, 2 tick marks, and 1 tick mark. That tells me that this triangle right here must be an obtuse scalene triangle. 100 degrees, 3 sets of marks. When I look at question B, the one thing that I notice is that we have the same number of tick marks on each side, 2, 2, and 2. And then I do notice that all of the angles have the same marks there also. So that means all of the angles are the same. Knowing what I know about triangles, I do know that there are 180 degrees in a triangle. And I know that if I divided that into 3 equal chunks, I would have 60 degrees in each angle. So although they didn't tell me the number, I can calculate what it is. And since all of those numbers are less than 90 degrees, that tells me I have an acute equilateral triangle. Looking at question C, I notice that I have this 90 degrees right here in the corner, so that tells me it's going to be right. And then I look at my tick marks and I see that I have 3 tick marks, 2 tick marks, and 1 tick mark. So again, that tells me that I have a right scalene triangle. The last question, I notice that I have tick marks on 2 of the sides that match, but that's all that I have. In this question, it appears that the angles are acute, but I don't actually know what they are because there are no numbers in any of these corners. And so for this question, the only thing that I can answer is isosceles because I only know information about the sides. So remember that we wanted you to use the marks that were given. Only use the given marks to decide what your conclusions are. And that's how we do those. Now we're going to move down to the last 2 questions. And for these 2 questions, they ask us to set up equations for each diagram. So again, we are only going to do the setup. And so for these questions, a couple things that we want to consider. Remember, we need to consider, are the angles inside or outside of the triangle? And then we need to remember that there are blank inside all triangles. There are what? There are 180 degrees inside of all triangles. So when I look at question E, I notice that when I shade the angles that are there, and again, it's a good idea to shade the angles with your pencil so that you realize where they are all inside the triangle. So I just have to write all of those angles down, 50 plus 3x plus 2 plus 2x, and equal that up to 180 degrees. If you did want to do a little mental math, you could add the x numbers together first. 3 plus 2 is 5x. And then you could do the number part, the 2 plus 50. And that also equals 180 degrees. That's just with some mental math. Both answers are correct. When we do letter F, the one thing that we notice is that we have this guy on the outside of the triangle. And these two angles right here are both on the inside of the triangle. So this is the exterior rule. Remember, these two angles that don't touch the angle equal the exterior rule. So for this one, we write 40 plus 2x equals x plus 72. In this case, we don't do any mental math because there's nothing, these two circles, the 2x and the 40, neither one of those are like terms, so we can't add anything together. We're all done with those problems. So now you're going to stop your and you can jump into the notes part, or the practice problems on page 2.